Hey everyone, hope you're having a great night or a great day, depending on when you listen to this. Welcome back to another episode of the Joe Cannon Health Podcast. Today I want to talk about, well, it's kind of a dietary supplement, kind of an ancient medication. Yeah, ancient, been used for thousands of years. And it's something that I think, well, maybe most of you probably haven't heard of before. I know I didn't until recently, but I think it's something that, well, some of you may be hearing about a lot in the coming months and years. So what I'm talking about is something called shilajit, which is something that is found in the Himalayan mountains, as well as several other places in the world. But we're going to talk about the human research on shilajit because, well, yeah, it has been used for thousands of years, but it's only fairly recently that it's been getting some attention in the laboratory. So to help you when you do encounter this, I want to give you basically a 10,000 mile view of the shilajit research in hopes that it'll give you a better idea if it's right for you when you encounter this product. But before we get into this, I want to talk about a study that crossed my computer screen not too long ago, and it's on these exogenous ketone supplements that have been all the rage for, well, gosh, last few years, as far as I could tell. And they're used for a number of reasons, but mostly they're used for weight loss. And there has been some concern as to whether or not these exogenous ketones are safe or not. And so I want to talk about this investigation that actually came out fairly recently. It's basically titled The Effects of Exogenous Beta-hydroxybutyrate Salt Supplementation on Metrics of Safety and Health in Adolescents. So yeah, this is a safety study on exogenous ketones, specifically beta-hydroxybutyrate, BHB. That's the main ketone that I see in most of these ketone supplements. Oh, and to take a step back, I use the word exogenous ketones. Exogenous ketones means outside of the body. We make endogenous ketones all the time in small amounts. But when they're taken in the form of a supplement, well, because you've got to consume them, they're called exogenous. They originate outside the body and you take them in as a dietary supplement. So what I'd say right off the bat is this is an investigation that has been supported by a dietary supplement company. It's actually a company that makes a exogenous ketone product. And that's good. I like it when supplement companies put their money where their mouth is. So what's this investigation look like? Well, it involved 22 healthy boys and girls. They were adolescents. And when I say adolescents, the average age was 13. That's another reason it kind of got my attention. I don't see a lot of dietary supplement research on kids. And so when I do, my radar kind of goes up and I'm like, well, that's interesting. So it's an investigation of basically kids, teenagers, and they consume 3.75 grams of beta-hydroxybutyrate or a placebo twice a day for 90 days. So they're consuming 7.5 grams of beta-hydroxybutyrate or a placebo for 3 months. So what happened in this investigation? Well, let's start off by talking about ketosis, because that's something that these supplements are supposed to do. And the researchers report that within 15 minutes of taking the exogenous ketones, the kids had enough BHB levels in their blood, the beta-hydroxybutyrate levels in their blood had gone up enough that they were said to be in a state of mild ketosis. And that's the phrase that they used, mild ketosis. So makes sense. BHB levels went up. I've seen this in other investigations. So that kind of makes sense. And that's a good thing. But after 30 minutes, it started to drop. 30 minutes later, fewer of the kids had mild ketosis. And then take it out an hour, 60 minutes, still even fewer. So what this appears to show is that you take the exogenous ketone supplement and then fairly quickly the BHB level goes up, but within an hour, you can expect that those levels would probably start to drop in the blood. And that kind of makes sense because you got to clear that stuff out. It's not just going to hang around, right? So that's pretty interesting that BHB levels stay elevated for maybe a half an hour, and then they start to go back down. And then with an hour or so, they're kind of back to normal. Now, on the plus side, researchers didn't see any changes in blood sugar or hemoglobin A1C levels. That's a marker. Hemoglobin A1C is a marker of blood sugar control. I thought that was actually kind of interesting because there has been some research that shows that ketone supplements, they appear to reduce blood sugar levels in people who are overweight. But the fact that this study didn't see any changes in blood sugar or hemoglobin A1C, it kind of makes sense because in this investigation, they were looking at basically healthy kids, healthy adolescents. They didn't have blood sugar problems. They didn't have diabetes. So if we take this study at its word and you're considering ketone supplements for your blood sugar, I think the results might depend on, do you have blood sugar problems? And if you do, then, well, maybe they might help. And if you didn't, well, then maybe they might not help. So no alterations in blood sugar. And there was no change in bone mineral density either. They actually gave these kids DEXA scans to measure their bone density. And again, no problems with bones. And I think they might have done that because there has been some speculation that high sodium diets might lead to bone loss. And these ketone salt supplements contain a lot of sodium. If you've ever tasted them, they don't taste so good. And so I think maybe the researchers were wondering, was it possible that maybe these supplements may cause calcium to leach from the bones? No, it didn't appear to in this investigation. So that's actually good news. But what about weight loss? This was actually a safety study to see if these products are indeed safe. And they did appear to show that. But remember, this was a 3-month-long study. So when I saw 3 months, I started to wonder, hey, I wonder if these kids lost any weight. And the answer is no. After 3 months, these researchers did not see any change in body weight, no change in percent body fat. They didn't lose body fat. There was no change in fat-free mass either. That's sometimes taken to be muscle. Muscle is fat-free mass. So there was none of that either going on. And I think that's important because the main reason, well, at least the main reason I think that people take ketone supplements is for weight loss. And in this study, no weight loss occurred. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that these were healthy adolescents. They were not overweight. And so that kind of makes some sense. If they weren't overweight, I wouldn't expect them to lose a lot of weight, and so they didn't. But I think this study could have been better. And it could have been better if they included a group of adolescents that were overweight. That's something I really would have liked to have seen. I get it. No study's perfect. All investigations have their limitations, and in my opinion, that was one of them. So it's great that ketone supplements appear to be safe in healthy adolescents. I'd just like to see this investigation followed up with another one that looked at maybe kids who weren't so healthy, or kids really that are overweight. Because again, those are the people who would be gravitating towards exogenous ketone supplements. So let's see what the future holds. Okay, so much for exogenous ketones. Let's jump into the meat of the discussion this week, and that is Shilajit. It's kind of a cool name when you think about Shilajit. I like it. It's a very exotic name. Now, if you've never heard of Shilajit before, well, it's essentially, it's kind of a palish, brownish, blackish, brownish substance. It's kind of like a tar-like substance. If that kind of jars your imagination, it kind of looks a little bit like tar. And it's found between the rocks and on the rocks in a variety of different places in the world, such as the Himalayan mountains, Chile, Russia, Norway, and I'm sure other areas as well. The way it's formed is Shilajit is a breakdown product of plants. Plants, as they degrade, bacteria act on the plants over hundreds and hundreds of years. And that combined with the pressure of the rocks that they're found within the rocks. Okay, different layers of rocks, and the bacteria, the microorganisms combined with the pressure and the heat over time, create this substance called shilajit. As the temperatures rise every year, the shilajit kind of oozes out from the crevices of the rocks, and it can be harvested for medicine. And it is a very popular medicine in Oriental medicine as well as Ayurvedic medicine. And just give you a brief overview of some of the things that shilajit is rumored to help. Well, improving energy and stamina, helping digestion problems, epilepsy, I've seen that in some of the research, anemia, arthritis, boosting the immune system. What doesn't these days? We hear that a lot these days. And it's also said in some corners to have basically aphrodisiac effects and basically be an all-around rejuvenator. So that's a pretty broad spectrum of things that it's supposed to help. So given that wide range of proposed effects, you'd probably be correct in assuming that shilajit is, well, something of an adaptogen. And if you're not familiar with that word, adaptogen, well, it comes from the world of herbal medicine. And an adaptogen refers to a compound that adapts. It adapts its effects according to what your needs are. So basically, an adaptogen kind of gives you what you need. You've probably heard, for instance, of the most popular adaptogen in the whole wide world, and that is ginseng. Ginseng is rumored to do a whole bunch of different things as well, very different things, and they say it's due to its adaptogenic qualities. Shilajit also appears to have antioxidant effects as well. For instance, in one of the reports I saw, and this report was simply titled Shilajit, a Review, and it was published in the Journal of Phytotherapy Research way back in 2007, researchers said that Shilajit was able to recycle vitamin C after it had been neutralized by free radicals. That's interesting. Although I don't recall seeing any human studies on this, so my guess is that reference may be due to, well, perhaps either a test tube study or maybe some animal research. But still, quite interesting. Now, I mentioned some of the things that shilajit is supposed to be doing, and I mentioned improving stamina and energy levels. And I think a lot of that comes from the Sanskrit name. In Sanskrit, shilajit literally means conqueror of mountain and destroyer of weakness. Wow. That's a pretty bold claim, a destroyer of weakness. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons why people take shilajit, to improve their energy, give them more pep in their steps, so to speak, and improve their stamina. As you investigate shilajit, you will hear a lot about shilajit from the Himalayan mountains. As I mentioned a little bit ago, it can be found in Norway, Chile, Afghanistan, I believe. I saw that as well, even Russia. I would point out that its chemical properties, its benefits, if you will, they do appear to differ depending on the region that it's harvested from. And that kind of would make some sense. There's a whole lot of different compounds in shilajit, and they would probably be affected by the soil, the type of bacteria that live in the area, the temperature of the ambient environment. So I guess I understand that point. And the shilajit from the Himalayan mountains usually is the most coveted. It's said to have the most therapeutic effects, although I haven't seen any side-by-side, head-to-head comparison between Himalayan shilajit versus Russian shilajit. Haven't been able to find that. So I'm not quite sure if it is or isn't, but that's definitely something that I would love to be able to find in a book or a study somewhere. But I think that might be one of the limitations of the research so far. It's only starting to get attention by the researchers over the last, 10, 15, 20 years or so. And so I think there's still a lot that we don't know. So that's essentially kind of a nice, broad spectrum of background information on shilajit. Found in a lot of places all over the world, rumored to have an awful lot of different effects, been used for centuries. But what does the clinical research say about shilajit? For the remainder of our time this week, I want to give you a nice summary of the human research that I was able to locate on shilajit. There are some test tube studies and rat studies out there, and they're great, but at the end of the day, we're people. And I think research conducted on people is much more relevant to us. So let's talk about some of this human research. I want to start off by addressing, well, kind of the elephant in the room. And that is, can Shilajit raise testosterone levels? Yeah, this is one of the reputations that this thing has. Shilajit is rumored to raise testosterone levels. And as I did a little bit of digging online, I saw some bodybuilders online who were asking about this. And so it's quite possible that perhaps this may be something that's used in athletics. I also saw references to Russian athletes during the Olympics experimenting with Shilajit. So is it possible that it can raise testosterone? Well, there is some evidence for this. And I would call your attention to an investigation that came out back in 2016. It's titled Clinical Evaluation of Purified Shilajit on Testosterone Levels in Healthy Volunteers. All right, now we're getting somewhere. Now we're talking people. So what's this study look like? Well, basically, there's 75 non-exercising men. So these are not athletes. These are regular run-of-the-mill people. They're not going to the gym 3 days a week. But there's 75 of them, and they're given either a placebo or 500 milligrams of Shilajit. And where I can, by the way, I want to tell you the dosages, because if you're just shopping for this stuff online, you might not have any baseline idea of how much to take. So where I can, I want to try to tell you the amount that's been used in research. So in this one, basically we're looking at 500 milligrams a day or a placebo for 3 months. So what did these researchers find? Well, interestingly, they find that those people taking Shilajit, they had about a 20% increase in total testosterone and free testosterone after 90 days compared to those taking a placebo. Wow, a 20% increase in both total and free testosterone after 3 months. They went on to point out that Shilajit also raised follicle-stimulating hormones, FSH, and maintained luteinizing hormone, LH. Now, if you're not familiar with those, FSH, follicle-stimulating hormone, it's a hormone, obviously, plays a role in a whole bunch of different things in the body, such as sperm production, testosterone production as well. In women, FSH plays a role in estrogen production and even the menstrual cycle. And in terms of luteinizing hormone, well, kind of basically the same thing with luteinizing hormone. Some testosterone supplements are actually based around raising luteinizing hormone, because the idea of it raises luteinizing hormone, well, then you'll make more testosterone. Here, these researchers found that it maintained the luteinizing hormone levels. So overall, pretty interesting stuff. Now, another hormone they looked at in this investigation is DHEA. DHEA is basically 2 chemical steps away from being converted to testosterone and estrogen, by the way. And researchers found Shilajit caused a significant rise in DHEA levels. Pretty interesting. As an aside, I'd point out that DHEA has its own anti-aging reputation. I remember way back in the 1990s, DHEA supplements were referred to as the fountain of youth. They're not, just so you know. I do remember seeing those ads in the stores. Again, if you're low in DHEA, maybe there might be some benefit, but if you're not low in DHEA, perhaps not so much. So all this sounds good. Raising of testosterone, DHEA, great. But one thing jumped out at me when I looked at this investigation, specifically looking at the testosterone levels. I'll just say that when it came to the free testosterone, they measured them in picograms per milliliters, and baseline, there were about 15 picograms per milliliter at the start of the study, and then 90 days later, their free testosterone had jumped to about 18 picograms per milliliter. Well, those numbers are a little low, if you ask me. 15, 18 in terms of free testosterone, that's on the low end. Matter of fact, just to double check, I went online and I went to the Quest Diagnostics website. Quest Diagnostics, if you're not familiar with them, Quest Diagnostics is a company that basically does blood tests. And odds are, if you're in the US, you've probably had your blood work analyzed by Quest Diagnostics. So when I checked their website and I looked for free testosterone, they listed for men between the ages of 18 and 69 years of age, they've ranged normal free testosterone levels as anywhere from 46 all the way up to 224, 46 to 224. Well, wait a minute. In this Shilajit testosterone study, these guys started out at 15. And after 3 months, they apparently were bumped up to 18. Still, if I take Quest at their word, that's on the low end of normal. And I think this is something the weightlifters and bodybuilders might want to pay attention to if they've heard about the testosterone boosting effects of Shilajit. Is it possible that these guys started off with low testosterone and Shilajit kind of helped them along? What does that mean for the bodybuilder out there who's lifting weights and working out and eating right and getting a lot of sleep? And would Shilajit have the same testosterone boosting effect? I'm not sure. And I think this is something the bodybuilders should maybe pay attention to. Gee whiz, when it comes to all testosterone booster supplements, I got to be honest with you and say that as a rule, I'm skeptical of most testosterone boosting supplements. I really am. And when people ask me, how do I raise my testosterone? The first thing I would say to them is, let's get your testosterone checked first before you try a supplement, and then try it for a few months and then retest your levels again. That's really the only way to know if in fact it is raising your testosterone levels. That's exactly what they did in this study. They did measure free testosterone, total testosterone, and it appeared to go up. But when these guys start off at 15, I start wondering, what's up with those guys? And would the same effect happen in somebody whose free testosterone is in the normal range? I don't know. I will point out that there are a couple other studies out there that do appear to show that Shilajit raises testosterone. They're out there, and I'll mention one in a few moments to you. But I think this study should be replicated. I think we should do it again and see if we could find the same results. Okay, so much for testosterone. Let's move on to another area that this compound is rumored to perhaps help, and that is dementia and memory. And that brings us to this investigation. And it's basically titled, Can Nutraceuticals Prevent Alzheimer's Disease? Yeah, Alzheimer's disease. Potential therapeutic effect of a formulation containing Shilajit and B complex vitamins. So what's this investigation looking like? Well, it's a fairly small study, 16 people, and they likely all have Alzheimer's disease. They're showing the telltale signs, and researchers split them up into two groups. One group gets a placebo, and another group gets a combination of Shilajit and 3 B vitamins. And the B vitamins are vitamin B6, vitamin B9, folate, or better known as folic acid in some circles, and vitamin B12. And in case you're taking notes, what does that supplement actually look like? Well, it was 400 milligrams of Shilajit, 29 milligrams of vitamin B6, 400 micrograms of folate, and 6 micrograms of vitamin B12. So they take this supplement or placebo for several months. What do they find? Well, the researchers showed that those taking the supplement, the combination of Shilajit and the B vitamins, they appeared to have less memory deterioration, and they showed fewer Alzheimer's symptoms. That's good. And it appeared that the supplement interacted with what they call the tau protein. It's kind of a nerdy topic, but the tau protein is rumored to play a role in the development of Alzheimer's disease. Tau is a protein, and as it deposits in the brain, it can contribute, some say, to Alzheimer's disease. So again, anything that could affect that might help Alzheimer's progression. So all this sounds really interesting, except that I would point out, as I read the study, most of the effects were not deemed to be clinically significant. They didn't reach the point at which the researchers said this is a real bona fide effect. And that's important, especially for any researcher looking at this. You want to look for significant effects. And so it looks like most of these effects were non-clinically significant. So I would say that's an issue right there. And then another problem with this study is that it really didn't have a group that only took Shilajit. Remember, they're taking a supplement that contains B vitamins plus Shilajit. So we really don't know the effects of Shilajit itself. And I bring that up because vitamins B6 and B12 and folic acid, they're known to reduce levels of homocysteine. And homocysteine is a compound that, well, it damages our blood vessels and it makes our blood vessels sticky. And it's usually discussed in the context of heart disease. For instance, maybe your doctor has even measured your homocysteine levels. But aside from heart disease, some have also speculated a link between homocysteine and dementia. So that's interesting, but I honestly gotta say, I doubt if the B vitamins alone would have produced the results that they saw in this investigation. I don't think these three B vitamins would have these effects. So you could say that maybe Shilajit played a role in some of the things they were seeing, but I personally would just like to have seen a Shilajit only group to know for sure. And I admit it, as I read these research papers to you, I admit that I'm basically an armchair researcher. You've heard of armchair quarterbacks and backseat drivers, and yeah, I'm kind of an armchair backseat researcher. When I read some of these studies, I often say to myself, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? I can't help myself. And basically my favorite studies are those that do what I would have done myself if I had a lab and unlimited resources. So this is an interesting investigation. I would love to see it replicated with a lot more people and have a Shilajit only study just to see what might transpire. But based on what I've seen so far, I don't see any evidence that Shilajit prevents Alzheimer's disease or significantly improves Alzheimer's disease. Or I wish I did, because it's a horrible condition, as anyone knows who has had loved ones afflicted with Alzheimer's. And unfortunately, this is the only study I saw on this compound and dementia. So hopefully there are some others in the pipeline that maybe will pop up in the next couple of years. So moving right along, we have this other investigation here, and this one's on infertility. And this one's titled Clinical Evaluation of Spermatogenic Activity of Processed Shilajit on Oligospermia. Boy, that really kind of says it all, doesn't it? There's no reason to tell you any more about this study, but yeah, I will. So this is a study involving 35 guys, and they're infertile. They have low sperm counts, all right? And they're given 200 milligrams of Shilajit a day, and the study lasts 3 months. I do like the fact that a lot of these studies on this compound, they do last several months. That's actually pretty darn good. So I'm glad to see that level of diligence among the researchers. So 3 months, that's really good. Now these researchers, they find that Shilajit significantly, there's that word, clinically significant improvements, significantly improved total sperm count. So sperm count goes up, and the motility of those sperm increased also. By motility, I mean they could swim better. For infertility, anything that turns your little swimmers into Michael Phelps is a good thing. So improved sperm count and the swimming ability of sperm. That's really interesting as well. One other thing I'd point out with this investigation, these researchers also noted that Shilajit increased testosterone levels by about 20%. That's similar to what we saw in that other study, about a 20% boost in testosterone. I do think results will vary from person to person. And again, the best way to know if your testosterone will go up by 20% is test your test levels first, and then try this thing or any other thing for a few months and retest again. So again, some confirmation that maybe there's something going on with testosterone levels. After reading the study I'm about to tell you, I'm kind of wondering if maybe Shilajit's going to start turning up in cosmetics. Here is the study I'm referring to. The human skeletal muscle transcriptome in response to oral Shilajit supplementation. Yes, say that one 3 times real fast. Again, I've said it before. Sometimes these researchers can't get out of their own way. It's like, just talk plainly. You don't have to impress people. But, all right, I digress again. Enough said about the titles of the studies. So, complex title notwithstanding, here we've got 16 men and women. They're given 500 milligrams of Shilajit a day for 8 weeks. And then they followed up with another 4 weeks where Shilajit was combined with treadmill exercise, 30 minutes of treadmill exercise 3 days a week. So this is kind of a exercise study, but this is about all I saw, by the way, in terms of exercise. I didn't see anything on weightlifting, in case you're wondering. I didn't see anything on bodybuilding, powerlifting, sprinting. So this is about as good as it gets so far. So by the way, college students, this is another great opportunity to get ahead of the pack and do some exercise research on Shilajit, whether it's testosterone or strength, etc. This is a wide open area for you. That said, what's this study looking like? So they give them the Shilajit for 8 weeks. They give another 4 weeks where they're on the treadmill. And essentially the researchers, they discover at the end of the study that Shilajit causes an increase in various gene activity that's associated with skeletal muscles, as well as collagen and elastin. So genes associated not only with muscle, but with collagen and elastin appeared to ramp up their activity. Now, I know what you're thinking. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. This is essentially a cell study where they took muscle biopsies of people and they took a look at them and analyzed the genes, and there's like, wow, we have some activity going on in some of these genes. So that's about as far as I think you can take this study. But since collagen and elastin are involved in skin and wrinkles, is it possible one day we might be seeing Shilajit in cosmetics to erase wrinkles or maybe smooth out fine lines and wrinkles? I don't know. I'm just trying to look into my crystal ball a little bit and look down the road and try to get an idea of what might pop up. And, well, it's possible, but this study doesn't prove that Shilajit has any effect on wrinkles. Unfortunately, the research just isn't there yet. So, again, anybody out there listening who wants to do a Shilajit wrinkle study, I would love to see it. As an aside on this particular investigation, one thing that's worth noting is that there were no changes in blood sugar. Blood sugar didn't go down, didn't go up. That's good, it didn't go up, but it didn't go down either. Cholesterol levels didn't change either. Bad cholesterol levels did not change either. And the same thing with triglycerides. There was no change in triglycerides or bad cholesterol either, as well as there was no alterations in muscle damage enzymes like creatine kinase or myoglobin. And I guess that's why they did the treadmill, because treadmill exercise could induce some muscle damage. Maybe depends on who these people were and the intensity of the exercise, but they didn't see any alterations in muscle damage enzymes. So the fact that they didn't see any changes in cholesterol and triglycerides, that's quite interesting, because in a previous investigation, this one's actually titled The Evaluation of Shilajit for Its Effects on Blood Chemistry of Normal Human Subjects, here these researchers reported that Shilajit reduced triglyceride levels, total cholesterol levels, and it even raised good cholesterol too. So quite the opposite of what that other study just said. Kind of contradicts each other. Now that said, in this study, there were 30 medical students, and they were given 1,000 milligrams of Shilajit a day for 45 days. So 1,000 milligrams versus 500 in the previous study I just mentioned. So maybe, and again, I'm speculating here, maybe if Shilajit is going to affect cholesterol levels, maybe it might take a higher dose. Again, I don't know. But I thought it was interesting to point it out, because you may have heard about how this stuff could lower cholesterol levels and triglyceride levels. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I think the research is intriguing and contradictory at this point and open for better studies. And from there, I think we come to the study that, at least it's the most interesting study I've seen so far, and it's on Shilajit and fractures. Yeah, bone fractures. What's this study look like? Basically, we got 160 people, and they all have fractures of the tibia. Tibia is a bone in your leg. And they're given either a placebo or 1,000 milligrams of Shilajit for a month. Now, the researchers, they do their due diligence and they take x-rays of the tibial bones every 4 weeks to see how fast the bones are growing back together again. These researchers note that in those taking the Shilajit, their bones healed faster. Specifically, the average time it took for the bones to grow together was 129 days versus 153 days in those taking the placebo. Yeah, so Shilajit appeared to speed up bone regrowth, the fusion of the bones, by about 24 days faster than those taking a placebo. I find that fascinating, and I honestly can't think of a mechanism through which Shilajit would do this. This is the only study on fractures I was able to find. So again, it's another wide open area of research that I'd love to see more people taking a look at. So really interesting stuff. And that's basically the lay of the land so far. Yeah, as I said before, there's a lot of rat studies and test tube studies. I'm going to admit them because that's not us. What I showed you today, what I talked about today, is basically the human research that I was able to uncover. It's quite possible there's other studies out there that I wasn't able to find, but that gives you kind of a lay of the land. And as you can tell, some of this research sounds really promising. But I have to be honest and say, as I was reading the studies, honestly, I wish there were better studies out there. That's my biggest complaint right now. I wish there were better studies out there. Some of the studies, well, I had issues with, to be honest with you. For instance, in some of these investigations, there were no mentions of side effects. It's like these researchers didn't even mention side effects. Well, wait a minute. Why aren't you talking about that? Everything's going to have side effects. At least mention the word side effects. I didn't see that in some of the studies, and I wondered why. In other investigations, there were quite a few people who had dropped out of the study. Researchers didn't tell us why those people had dropped out. Normally, when you read a clinical study, they'll tell you people dropped out for reasons X, Y, and Z, and they'll even compare that to those in the placebo group. I didn't see that in some of the studies, and that bothered me a little bit. I have to be honest with you. I like it when researchers lay everything out so I can see it all for myself, and I didn't see that. And so for the armchair researcher, again, that's just something I would like to see done, better research. And then something else occurred to me as I was looking through these research studies, and that is whether Shilajit is a sustainable supplement. We hear a lot about sustainable in supplements these days. Oh, it's sustainable, it can continue forever. And, well, is that really true about Shilajit? Think about it. This stuff is harvested, for lack of a better word, from the mountains of Himalayas, Chile, Russia, etc. But from what I could gather, it takes hundreds, if not thousands of years for Shilajit to be created. So maybe as Shilajit grows in popularity, I wonder how long the demand could keep pace with the supply. I don't know the answer to that. And I haven't so far heard anybody talking about that yet. And one other thing is, which we haven't really talked about yet, and that is the cost of this stuff. So I gotta tell you, it ain't cheap. Shilajit is expensive. I've seen some products going for $50 for a half an ounce or less than a half an ounce. So I think that price also factors into the scarcity of the product. And because maybe it is scarce, I think you want to do your homework if you're looking into Shilajit, because I would not be surprised if there were products out there that were fake and didn't have what they said they had. So I think it's good to do your homework, investigate the companies, find out who they are, where they are at, and stuff like that. Shilajit's definitely an intriguing compound, and in spite of my reservations about some of the studies I've seen, can't deny there is some really intriguing research going on. I view some of this research as preliminary, and I'm really looking forward to better studies in the future. And if they come out, well, then I'll do another episode to talk about it. Hey, by the way, if you are looking for an unbiased source to do a coaching call with, I am available. You can email me at either of my websites, joe-kenny.com or supplementclarity.com. We can take a look at the supplements you're taking, your exercise program. If you have rhabdomyolysis, I do a little bit of stuff on that as well. But yeah, email me and we can talk. So that's all I got for you this week, except for my quote of the week, which comes to us from Henry David Thoreau, and it goes like this: "What you get by achieving your goals is not as important as what you become by achieving your goals." Until next week, same time, same channel, I'm Joe Cannon. Go out, be safe, and where you can, try to make a difference.